Did you know that there is still one country left in Europe that is cheap for a traveler to visit? A country that is known all over the globe for its delicious wine. A place that has given the world a masterpiece like this. Yet why doesn't almost anyone want to travel here? Well, that's exactly what we are gonna try to find out today as we travel to the most unpopular and poorest country in Europe. Most people who travel to Moldova do it by plane. They fly to the capital Kishinev and take tours from there. Our plan was different. We wanted to see all that this place has to offer. Its cities, countryside, and even the parts most people don't dare to visit. Small, autonomous countries inside Moldova with rich and unique culture. And for this we needed to drive. We entered Moldova from pretty much the only place possible. This small nation is historically jammed and landlocked between its two big neighbors. First being Ukraine, where there is currently ongoing war. And second one, Romania, which was our best bet. The border crossing was smooth. Yes, the officers were a little surprised when we said that we're gonna be tourists in Moldova, but they let us through. Yet right after entering the country, we had our first culture shock. While visiting a toilet of a small gas station, I saw the narrowest roll of toilet paper I had ever seen. It was almost the width of my arm. I literally had to concentrate hard not to draw over the edges, if you know what I mean. Sorry, no more poop jokes, I promise. Also, the energy drink that we got from the station had almost double the amount of caffeine compared to what is allowed in the European Union. With our heads nicely buzzing from the caffeine, it was finally time to start discovering the country. Although Moldova has about 2.6 million people living on a relatively small piece of land, then straight away we felt that the place was empty. Not empty in a Northern Europe way, where emptiness means forests and wild nature, but more like endless fields of corn and sunflower, and not a single person in sight. By the way, more than a third of Moldova's population actually work in a field of agriculture, so that probably justifies all the fields. The emptiness could also be felt on the roads. We were driving some of the main highways, yet most of the time there was not a single car in sight. To break up a relatively boring drive, we decided to stop at the local fruit vendor. They were quite shy, to be honest, but still allowed us to film the fruit. Oh, and English does not get you far in this country. Until 2013 they spoke Moldovan, but then the national court decided that, Moldovan and Romanian is the same language. And also most of the locals can speak Russian. With the help of Liisu's Russian, we were able to buy ourselves a watermelon. It cost about €2, and I'm pretty sure we got the tourist price. But still, it was worth every cent. After that, it was time to discover the life in a small village. First thing we noticed was that every house had a green gate. I tried to Google it, but I have no idea why. So if you have any theories or you actually know why, please let us know down in the comments. Secondly, most locals that we saw were busy either cleaning up the streets or painting the stones of the sidewalk. It had a certain kind of beauty to it. And also, every house that we saw had its own small garden with vegetables and grapes. Soon we found out that nearby is a place that many locals describe as one of the most beautiful sights in a whole country. Capriana Monastery was actually the first place with a visitor's parking lot. Yes, it was empty, but it still had it. The atmosphere on this site was extraordinary. It's almost 600 years old and still has holy men living in here. The energy in the air could be felt. It was clean, quiet, and calming. Of course, the churches in the complex were amazing as well. They were painted and gilded from the floor to the ceiling. And due to the handmade candles, they all smelled like beeswax. With a newfound peace in our minds, we continued our journey towards Moldova's capital, Chisinau. The road that took us to Chisinau was a 8-lane highway. Going by its condition, I would say Soviet-made. Driving over 70 in our small home on wheels felt like a small earthquake. I'm quite sure that car shops that fix suspension are quite well off in this country. The city itself was a total surprise. We expected a Soviet monstrosity, but no. Chisinau was green and clean, and to get to know the local people a bit better, of course, as a first thing, we decided to visit its market. It was the first time in Moldova that we saw hordes of people, and of course all of them local. Tourist numbers in Moldova are extremely low. In 2020, less than 30,000 people visited this country. Locals loved the market. Prices were low, and we were so tempted to fill our bags with fresh fruits and veggies because they were all cheap. Time had flown by on the market, and we were getting hungry. We made a deal that first night we were gonna fine dine in a place that Liisu chooses, and on the next day eat like locals in a place that I get to pick.
Full on panic.
It was surprisingly hard finding a fine dining place that serves local food, because what's new and interesting for the locals is, well, pizza and burgers. Because serving fancy and more expensive Moldovan food is probably not the best business idea if there's no tourists. Finally success. It was surprisingly cheap. A pint of local beer cost about €1.50, and a glass of pretty good wine was only slightly more than €1. I had a bowl of cold local soup, and of course meatballs with mashed potatoes, which is really common in Moldova. Liisu had the eggplant pulled pork pan dish. The food was exceptional. Then dessert, and for all of this a fine dining experience, we paid about €20. In the evening we had time to discover the city itself. Controversial, I would say. Beautiful yet weird. Like two styles had crashed into each other in the middle of Moldovan capital. Side by side, beautiful French-style houses, and then Soviet beasts. On the next corner, ruins of what once was a house, and next to it, something totally modern. The overall feeling of Chisinau, it felt safe. It had parks and green spaces. Yes, one of them had old Soviet statues in it, but it still felt kinda nice. We decided to sleep next to a lake, near the capital itself, hoping to have a nice swim in the morning. Well, the reality was sad. Trash everywhere, and the water extremely dirty. So we just left the place in a hurry. How you doing?
Hurry up!
And it was finally time for me to choose the place where we can have breakfast. I had seen a place the night before. The diner was packed with locals, and it looked exactly how most diners did in the Soviet times. A long line of food, and you literally show the lady what you want. Quite hard without speaking the language.
Full on panic.
Yet absolutely delicious. We had different meats, a red beet soup called borscht, cakes, coffees, and all of this for about €10.
How to make your man happy.
It was finally time to move on to the part of Moldova that most of the world knows it by. Crazy to think that about 25% of the local workforce is somehow working in a wine industry. And well, from people's backyards to huge valleys, grapes grew everywhere. Moldova also has the biggest wine cellar in the world, Milesti Mici. It has 200 kilometers of underground passages holding world's biggest wine collection, more than 2 million bottles. The place didn't look so big above the ground. Yeah, it had lovely atmosphere and was probably the only place in a country that really focused on tourists. And for this reason, we actually never made it below the ground. It was the only expensive thing we saw in the whole country, and it would have cost us about 100 euros for a quick tour below the surface and a small tasting. Water. Our whole Moldovan adventure for 3 days cost us about the same, 100 euros. There had to be a better way, right? So we started to look for a smaller winery. And the first thing we noticed was that once you leave the main road, it gets even more bumpier. We visited about 3 more wineries, yet none did tastings. Why would they keep the stuff on if there's no one to visit them? Our final solution was simple. We paid about 3.5 euros for a bottle from the same famous winery. It was delicious. By the way, cheap wine in this country starts at about 2 euros a bottle. We knew that the third day in the country was going to be special. Moldova is known to have autonomous territories in its borders. The better known one is probably Transnistria.
Transnistria, a small strip of land between Moldova and Ukraine, has been disputed territory since the fall of the Soviet Union.
It declared itself as a Soviet republic in 1990.
Yet Transnistria has Russian military presence. It was not an option for us. The place we went to was Gagauzia. From what we knew, it was supposed to be a place where Turkic people historically live. A nice place to practice our Turkish right before we enter Turkey in our next video. Truth, on the other hand, was a bit of a surprise for both of us. Gagauzia was much more Russian than Turkish. Yes, in few official places we could still see signs in all 3 languages. Yet 95% of it felt Russian. It's probably the first and the last time we have a chance to try some Turkish food made by a blonde Russian woman. Liisu still enjoyed the food a lot.
This is some good stuff.
Oh, she has no idea what's gonna wait for her in Turkey. Then, of course, statue of a Soviet leader, few red stars on a street. It was quite funny, they almost looked like Canadian flags. And then finally, it was time for us to leave. As we were driving towards the border once again, we tried to wrap our heads around the whole Moldovan experience. Why don't tourists want to come here? I must admit that the countryside of this country was really nothing special. Almost no wild nature, and a few places that still did exist were trashed. Yet the country's beautiful capital, local food, wine, and of course the low prices would make it a perfect destination for a traveler who really doesn't want to spend their whole year's savings on a 1-week holiday. I myself will definitely mark Kishinev down as a place where I'd like to spend a few more days. Oh, and by the way, the last conversation we had in this country was with a border officer, and it went a little bit like this. He looked into our van and asked, "Cigarettes? Alcohol?" I said no. He took a moment and asked, "Trucks? Weapons?" I said no. And then he shrugged his shoulders and laughed. "Then why the heck would you visit Moldova?" My friends, it was a pleasure to have you with us discovering the least visited country in Europe. And we hope to see you again on the channel. as next time we will be in the 10th country on our journey to Japan. And the country is Turkey, or with a new name, Turkey.